Welcome to Truman's Town Hall with your host, Matt Truman.
Hello. This is Matt Truman. Thank you for downloading this episode. Thank you for sharing with a friend. To all the new listeners out there, thank you for downloading, and please share with a friend. Today on the podcast, we have Richard Shaw. He's the current Ward 1 representative in the city of Huber Heights. He is running for the at-large seat in the city of Huber Heights, and we talk all about that. But first, we talk about what I have dubbed the Huber situation. It's the resignation of the Huber Heights city manager and all of the, shall we say, controversy that has surrounded it. To all those listening, this podcast is for you, the residents of Huber Heights, those who want to be informed on what is actually happening, the decisions made by your government. That's why I do this podcast. And I know I've focused on the last few podcasts about the city of Huber Heights, and we'll get back into other discussions on issues happening around the state, around the nation. We'll talk about all that stuff. This may be one of the last podcasts we talk about the Huber conversation. I invited your mayor. Apparently, he doesn't want to do the podcast, and that's fine. Understood. But Mr. Shaw was a very important person to talk to involved in this situation. We get his perspective today. And I ask some of the unanswered questions, and we get the answers. And I thank you for listening. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Richard Shaw. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Richard Shaw, Ward 1 representative in the city of Huber Heights. Mr. Shaw, thank you for doing Truman's Town Hall.
Oh, my pleasure, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Well, on this podcast, we've been talking about what I've dubbed the Huber situation, and that is the city manager situation, essentially, where you guys have voted to accept the resignation of your city manager, and there's a lot of things that go into all this. What is a good takeaway, if you could just break it down a little bit briefly, and then we can go into some other ideas that I have about this entire situation?
No, my pleasure. I think your Huber situation, and I believe Huber situation too, has given a fair assessment to what has taken place. I guess ultimately the takeaway is the previous city manager is no longer employed here in the city, and I still stand by my belief that it wasn't done properly.
What exactly do you think should have been done better?
Well, what could have been done better, and I stated this publicly, I could have asked more questions. However, coming out of the Monday meeting with the unanimous vote that took place, I still stand steadfast in my understanding. There was no confusion at that time that we were essentially firing our city manager at the time. We were window dressing it to accept a resignation, as has been done in previous other city manager situations across the region. And we were parting ways with a severance package that was in correlation with a consulting agreement. However, that changed the next Tuesday morning when I see a quote in the Dayton Daily News from the mayor of our community that the previous city manager has resigned for other opportunities. That is where the confusion took place, because that's not what was discussed. There was never any discussion that the city manager found other opportunities or other opportunities were presented to him.
When you guys came out of the executive session, do you feel like everyone, because it seems to a lot of us who are just looking at it through either the internet or there in council chambers. It seems like to a lot of us, everybody was on the same page. Do you feel like everyone was on the same page, that it was a window dressing, or do you think there were other things involved?
Well, again, coming out of that Monday meeting, I think everybody was on the same page. There was no confusion across the board that, again, we were firing the previous city manager, and we were going to accept his resignation, and that be it. As I stated previously, the confusion took place that Tuesday morning, late Tuesday afternoon, when reports started coming out of the contrary.
Were you contacted by the Dayton Daily News at all?
I was. I was contacted by a Dayton Daily News reporter, and I provided my opinions of what took place and my belief.
And they didn't use, because I don't remember reading your views or what you gave the reporter. So they didn't use your input from that report. Do I have that right?
That is correct. Additionally, ABC Fox 45 had contacted me as well, along with Councilmember Don Webb. I was probably on a Zoom interview with them for roughly about 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and there's a lot of information regarding my beliefs and my views and opinions that took place that was not used also.
Well, that's a good thing with these podcasts. We can go essentially as long as we want. One major question I think a lot of residents have is, why did you vote without having all the contracts in front of you? Why did that happen?
Well, that's a great question, and I explained that a bit in detail at a previous meeting, when I understood the vote was to authorize our law director to get with the previous city manager to execute the documents that would then, at that point in time, be brought back and forth to council for a vote, as been done previously with these types of resignations, firings of previous city managers in Huber Heights.
Right.
And that was my full understanding. And I believe I even laid out some other times where this council has used the term execute in a manner where details, documents were brought back.
So after doing or after explaining all of the issues that have happened before, or I won't even say issues, but the votes that have happened before, where the city attorney would bring back certain documents, has it happened before where council is given the execute vote, I guess, or order, and it hasn't been brought back?
To my knowledge, there has been those times. I believe Councilmember Lyons provided a few explanations of that during year-end legislation, kind of routine items. Additionally, there have been other times where they have been done that council has been thoroughly involved in a previous discussion, whether it took place in executive session, of what was transpiring with economic development. I know the mayor has provided a few of those details, but to my knowledge, there's never been a situation where something has been out on a whim. The execute has been given.
Another question I think citizens are wanting to know, that was talked about on throughout these meetings that have taken place. There was, I believe, 4 meetings in total over this situation. And thankfully, I believe you were the first to call for a special meeting, and that was at the March 10th meeting. So then other special meetings came about. What happened on the Saturday that you met with Mayor Gore and Representative Mark Campbell, or Councilman Mark Campbell? Can you talk about that?
I have no issues not talking about that. that Saturday meeting took place via a text message, where it started via text message. Me and my wife was doing some shopping at the local Walmart here in town. I received a text message out of the blue from the mayor, and Councilmember Otto was in that text message string asking to meet at City Hall.
Real quick,
no idea.
Is this the first time you heard of the mayor looking to find a way to, and I'm trying to soften this up a little bit, maybe I shouldn't, but is this the first time you heard about the city manager situation in Huber Heights from the mayor? I know you and Councilman Otto, going way back, have had your differences with the former city manager, but is this the first time from the current mayor, Mayor Gore, that you heard about the issues with the city manager at the time?
So let me make sure I completely understand the question. Are you asking me, has the mayor contacted me or had previous side discussions regarding his disapproval of the previous city manager? Yes,
exactly.
Yes, those conversations have taken place previously.
Is that something you can talk about publicly, or would you?
Yeah, definitely not a problem. Now, again, I don't have the exact dates and times those occurred. I do have them noted. However, I do believe there was one meeting that myself, Mr. Otto, Councilman Campbell, and Mayor Gore attended at a Frickers, where we were actually seen by a couple of different residents who had reached out to me after that meeting and kind of inquired, "Hey, what'd you guys talk about? You know, what was you guys doing there?" And during that time, there was a discussion where it was asked that certain developers be brought in for a city project. At that time, of course, me and Mr. Otto said, "No, we're not doing these no bid friends and family contract deals." During that discussion, the mayor had alluded to and stated that he had some issues with the previous city manager's performance. So that was one occasion that took place. Additionally, I've heard of other council members that have had their concerns and previous employment review issues with the previous city manager. Some of those have made very public comments about communication, project status on different economic development things going on within our city, and I think that's very troubling, because as I discussed at the previous meeting, these same individuals who have had these concerns continue to give very favorable reviews, written reviews, regarding our city manager, and through that process, the mayor would gather those documents and provide those employment reviews to those individuals. However, there would be no follow-up conversation as to what was discussed. So as I stated during the public meetings, I stopped doing the employment reviews because there was no feedback and they were going nowhere. The actual information was not being provided, in my opinion.
So I guess I have a question. How often do these sidebar conversations or these backroom meetings, however anyone wants to put, how often does that take place?
Well, I can tell you that it is not common for the mayor or Mr. Campbell, or as a matter of fact, any other council member, to reach out to me and say, "Hey, there's a certain item going on within the city. I'd like to bounce some things off of you," or anything like that. To my knowledge, the two meetings that I just referenced to you are the only two meetings that I can tell you I've been a part of.
Okay.
There was an initial time when I first joined council that myself and Mr. Campbell did do lunch, kind of a initiation, kind of welcome to council type thing at the TGI Fridays.
Okay.
But yeah, no, this is these backdoor meetings that you hear of other council members taking part of in the past several years. That is not something that I involve myself in, and when I do, I've got no problem talking about them publicly when those matters come up.
I don't think it's a big secret that you and Mr. Otto are friendly outside of city council. So do you guys often talk about council issues and things like that? Would you consider that a public meeting or a backdoor meeting, or is this something that you, like you said, you had no issues talking about things like that? So
correct. Now, yeah, there's no secret. I believe we've been very transparent with the fact that myself and Mr. Otto, our families are very close. I've attended a lot of his family events, graduations, funerals, celebrations, events, holidays. And does city business get talked? There are occasions where, something happened on Monday night. How'd you think things went? Was there any additional follow-up? Those kind of discussions do take place.
Right.
Now, the mayor had alluded to previously that, myself and Mr. Otto have all these secret meetings with third-party individuals and organizations, and a part of that is true. We do have a lot of discussion with our regional partners and other elected officials. The difference is, Matt, is those conversations are transposed back to city administration and very often talked about very publicly on the dais.
I believe one of the discussions was about selling water to different cities or companies. Both of those instances, I believe you said on the meeting that you brought it back. You even talked to the assistant city manager at the time about.
At the time, there was conversations between the previous city manager, assistant city manager, and even the city engineer on some discussions regarding Tri-Cities, what we were available to do, what could be done in the agreement. We were invited by the Dayton Chamber of Commerce because of our great working business relationship, not only with our own chamber, but the regional chambers. Myself, Mr. Otto, I believe previous city manager was invited. I believe the mayor at the time was invited. I can't validate that without going back and looking at it. I know there was also another council member from, I believe, Tip City that was at that meeting as well. I believe at time Councilwoman Smith was there at that meeting. Representatives from Cargill was there. And a lot of that discussion took place because of issues that Cargill had with the city of Dayton and Montgomery County on water usage, EPA issues that was going on. And they wanted our help to have some conversations and get some information because they are the largest water user in Montgomery County. A lot of employees there from a lot of the communities that surround the city of Dayton, and they had some very serious concerns and operational issues. So throughout those conversations, even brought those back to council. A lot of public emails had went back and forth. And thankfully, because of our conversations, some of the conversations with the county that had through the Dayton Chamber, those issues were resolved. There was even further discussions of expansion of Cargill at that time, and how that could benefit Huber Heights and some of the other communities. So yeah, those conversations took place, but there was nothing secret about it.
Where did that meeting take place? Do you remember?
I believe, to the best of my knowledge, that meeting took place. It was, I'm wanting to say, at the Dayton Chamber of Commerce offices or at the Dayton Convention Center in one of their locations.
So not at a private supper club?
No, not a private supper club, not at a casino, not at somebody's house. That was at a very public location.
Are there, outside of you and Mr. Otto being friendly, I think everybody knows the Team Huber how you guys first got involved in city council, or together as it involved in city council. But outside of that, have there been private meetings that the residents should know about?
The only other private meetings I can think of that have been discussed, very publicly is at the time former New Carlisle mayor regarding some water, former mayor Bill Flotty regarding some water, mayor of Trotwood. But again, those conversations were brought back to the dais, very much expanded on and discussed. And at that time, those three communities had come to us during our discussions of our expansion of our water softening, saying, hey, our residents are getting raked over the coals by the county with these very expensive water rates. Is there anything that Huber Heights could possibly do? So there was discussions, again, with the city engineer, previous city manager about, easements that would need to be done, how the infrastructure is tied in. And again, a lot of that was, I think almost all of it was brought back very publicly. There have been discussions with our Chamber of Commerce that have been forwarded to, city administration. I have lots of, I guess, if you want to call them private meetings, backdoor meetings, if the political spin wants to be put on it, with local business owners. I've had a couple of meetings with Broad Reach retail partners previously when they owned Wayne-Town Plaza. I've had a lot of meetings with residents. So, yeah, a lot of those conversations have been brought back publicly.
I think it's important for city council members, mayors, city administration to have conversations with residents. I personally wouldn't consider that a backdoor meeting or something like that. I think more along the lines, if a resident, in a resident's perspective, a backdoor meeting is more like council members getting together, deciding on how to do the city's business without actually having a public discussion during a city work session and things like that. I think it's very important to a lot of residents that I've spoken to, a lot of residents that listen to this podcast, and it doesn't, to me, the Saturday meeting prior, I think residents may have an issue with that. Whether it's a big issue or a small issue, that's for them to decide. But the things like discussing selling water and benefiting the city with a big group of folks from all around the region, I wouldn't necessarily classify that as a backdoor meeting. So I don't know how folks would I think about that. But I think a big question would be, what would you do differently after having gone through this process? What would you do differently that maybe wasn't done this time?
Well, again, I alluded to the fact that, during Monday night's executive session, if we're playing Monday morning quarterback, what could have been done different? I would like to have seen the consulting agreement in front of me. Right. I would, during the previous Saturday meeting prior to that, I left that meeting with the understanding that the mayor was going to ask the law director to have copies of the contracts and dollar amounts in full detail with copies available to council at an executive session on Monday. Those documents weren't provided. Matter of fact, a lot of things had changed from that Saturday meeting after the Monday vote because, I started doing additional research because things that were presented to me on Saturday, the discussions of, hey, we got a problem with the previous city manager. I think it's time to go in a different direction. And even the conversations that, came out of that, the mayor was going to contact the law director. Having researched how things took place from Saturday to Monday behind the scenes without me knowing about it, when I spoke with the law director on after Monday night and then on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, I think I had conversations with him over the phone, asking questions and figuring out what in the world was going on. I mean, even leading up to that, the dollar amounts for the entire agreement kept changing.
Right.
I mean, at first it was $150,000. Then, wait, now it's $155,000 because of the medical benefits. Oh, but wait, now it's not $155,000. Now it's $170,192. So, I mean, again, over a period of almost a week, those numbers kept changing.
There's been another question out there. I think folks have been, and we'll get back to that, because there was a like $5,000 for benefits and then $20,000, and it was rather odd. But one question I think residents have been asking is about the laptop. Public entities, like government entities, don't normally give away laptops. Private companies, maybe you can buy out, like you received a laptop, you can buy it out. That wasn't done. That was just, this laptop was just given away. Why is something like that done?
So let me expand on that just a bit. You actually were kind of going into that. So it has been done previously that when a council member retires and they have, let's say, an iPad, a Surface, whatever the case may be, obviously that council member holds on to that during their entire term. Versions of iPad and electronics, it seems like every day changes. As soon as you buy it off the shelf, now it's obsolete. So typically what happens is when those employees, council members, sometimes there are an option for you to buy those out, because what would happen is the employee or the council member would turn that in. The city then has to go through, wipe out the VPN, which again, that happens, any way, shape, or form, releases, the certificate of security from the city. That happens remotely with IT. And then at that point, they would be transferred over to GovDeals for sale and acquisition. So a lot of folks may know that is customary with a lot of things that we have in the city: police cars, public works items, things of that nature. So when those items go to GovDeals, the city actually has to pay a very high percentage, kind of like a seller's fee on that, on top of whatever the item sells for initially. And in most cases, and GovDeals is very public. You or anybody else listening to this podcast can go on to www.govdeals.com and see a lot of the things that cities are selling. So sometimes the thought is, well, instead of going through that process and getting, literally pennies for something, we'll allow the employee to buy that out and just save the city that process, time, and expenditure of going down that road. Okay. Now, in my opinion, with the city manager, I didn't expand on the laptop because it was at the understanding that he was going to be consulting with the now interim city manager for a period of 6 months. So if we was to take his laptop and all of the information he had been working on, how much would that consulting have really benefited? So that
brings up a good question. Go ahead. I'll let you finish that thought.
Yeah. So it's my understanding that was one of the many reasons that he asked to keep that laptop. And again, in my opinion, there was no issues with that. That didn't raise any red flags or anything else of that nature. Because a lot of the other things that have taken place in our community and customary in other communities regarding, electronics of that nature.
Okay, fair enough. But it brings up an interesting point, and when we're talking about this consulting agreement, and a lot of things were brought up, such as the Rose Music Center being one, contact through Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, water and sewer. That's a big deal. Infrastructure is a huge deal with the city. Doesn't the city pay quite a bit of money to hire already a consulting company, a contract company to run the Rose Music Center?
Yes, Mimi does run the operations of the Rose Music Center. A lot of that comes back to city staff and council for review. But yes, they are the day-to-day operations. Same thing with our Tri-Cities agreement, Miami Valley Communications, Miami Valley Lighting. The city has a lot of those third-party entities that we consult with. Same thing with the energy aggregation program, trash services through currently Republic. There are a lot of those. Our water through Suez, that the city will go out, have an agreement with and a contract with to run those operations or consult with. So that is a very valid point. I will say that, it is a bit mind-boggling on my end, having an assistant city manager, now interim city manager, that is very well qualified in my opinion. Scott has done an absolute amazing job with a lot of the things that he has been handed, prepared, and has seen through in our community. Is it a situation that Scott really needs 100% consulting, hand-holding, babysitting from the previous city manager? In my opinion, no.
Right.
Now, if he does, that brings up another topic of conversation, which is something that myself and Mr. Otto have said multiple times, that we have a communication problem in our city. Because it is my opinion that if any city manager in any city has two assistant city managers, such as us, there is no reason that city manager and those two assistant city managers should not know everything at all times. Right. Because, again, let's say something unforeseen was to happen, a tragic accident, whatever the case may be. Individual comes in and quits on the dime. We don't know. There needs to be that line of succession that's already in place, so there's no interruptions to our residents on public services and day-to-day operations.
In the military, we call it cover down, where you cover down on someone. I was a senior medic. I had medics underneath me, and if I fall, then other medics have to pick up this. There was a gentleman who spoke on the March 16th meeting, I believe, and he was talking about that. He worked in program management, I believe, for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That seems like how it should be done, is that everyone should know the job of the person beside them. And what do you think should be done? Is there some type of legislation that needs to be done? More communication, something that the new interim city manager should bring about, that something like this would never need to be done again?
Well, and again, as it was stated previously, the only other time that we've had a consulting agreement, to my knowledge, was previous city manager Gary Adams. So I believe the legislation has been passed, and it's called the Organizational Chart of the City. And if the organizational chart of the city is not being followed by city administration, then in my opinion, that would allude to, well, we've got a serious communication problem.
So it really falls on, this really falls on council, I would say, and everyone needs to get on board with the reports, the evaluations for the interim city manager. Do you have any ideas, like maybe a 3-month report? Okay, here's how it's going. 6-month report, because it's going to take a while, and then before you get a new city manager up and running. What are your thoughts there?
No, I agree. I would like to see something of that nature come out that is currently in place with our law director. So the way it is with updates from our law director, any type of active litigation, potential litigation, City Council gets a very thorough update from our law director on how things are going, how things are transpiring. and things of that nature. I could see that same type of activity report being done by our interim city manager. But Matt, I think this actually expands on a bigger issue that previously the residents of this community, council members, would receive a very thorough report from the city manager, and it was the city manager report each month.
Right.
In that report was very detailed from every department head, what was going on in the police division, fire division, across the board. Projects, capital improvement items, employee status, overtime, whatever. It was very thorough. And then just all of a sudden, that stopped. And it had been brought up multiple times. Why did that stop? And no reason for it.
So there was no directive from the mayor, city council. It just stopped.
No, there was no directive at all. I know myself and Mr. Otto had brought it up at several public meetings, requesting that continue. There was no buy-in from other council members or mayors. They believed that wasn't necessary, that the previous city manager could continue doing as he sees fit, in my opinion. I mean, Matt, that also even goes on newsletters. Previously, our residents would receive newsletters in their water bill. Would get a lot of that updated information. And then all of a sudden, those stopped for no reason.
And who was in charge of all that? Was the city manager in charge of that?
That is correct.
Interesting.
And of course, you're seeing, I mean, if everybody, that's paying attention is drawing, lines, it's election time, so yeah, we're gonna have discussions about newsletters and we're gonna have a lot of these discussions to make those who are on the ballot and those who are in fear of their current positions, that they got to get out and put their name on something, and we got to get some things rolling, and that's very unfortunate that the election time has to spawn things that have been asked for in this community for quite some time.
Right. I will get into that, and I'll ask you some questions about the current election. I have one last question for me on all of this, the previous meetings. Something that really stood, well, actually, I have two questions here. I'll start with this. Councilman from Ward 2 mentioned $1 million. The Rose brought in $1 million in 2020. Were there any concerts that happened in 2020 last year at the Rose?
To my knowledge, no. And
how did the Rose make $1 million with no concerts? I don't understand that.
Well, that is a great question. One of which I had inquired on myself. I actually had a couple of residents reach out to me and say, how did this happen? How is there this money that was made? I actually had sent an email out to our current interim city manager, our finance director, law director, and copied our clerk of council on it. That happened on March 16th at 1:15 p.m., asking that very same question. How was that possible? How did that happen? There was no concerts there. I don't quite understand it.
$1 million is a lot of money to make with no concerts.
So I will say that I did receive a response back from the interim city manager, and he said, Richard, I believe you are looking for the 2019 report, as there was no shows in 2020. Attached is that report, details said items. Also, the debt service payments from the TIF funds. Let me know if you have anything else on this topic.
So perhaps the Ward 2 councilman misspoke?
I would be interested if the Ward 2 council member can provide proof of that $1 million. And I do know that, there are sponsorship dollars that do come in we do have that agreement with Rose and Foundation that we get a certain amount of money every year. I'm sure that there are other sponsorship agreements that those dollars came in. But again, we still had to make debt service payment on the building.
Right.
The lights were still on there, so we still had to pay lights. There was somebody that was working on having conversations regarding some of these previous acts that had to reschedule. I can guarantee you that I'm sure Mimi did not come up and say, hey, due to some unfortunate incidents this year, you guys don't need to pay us. We'll take care of that. I'm sure they got paid. So yeah, that's something I'm looking into, and I would be very encouraged if the Ward 2 council member would like to provide that information to back up that statement.
Yeah, that really stuck out to me. Okay, my last question for all these meetings, something that was kind of slid in there, and it's something that's very near and dear to my heart, is the Veterans Memorial.
Okay.
And the mayor mentioned briefly that part of what his last straw was the Veterans Memorial. I've watched a discussion between, it looked like the former city manager and Mr. Otto about Chinese granite, which, by the way, is, in my view, horrible for a Veterans Memorial. You can ask any Korean veteran about that. But what's up with the Chinese granite? What's up with, do you know what the mayor was talking about, where that was his last straw? Can you elaborate for me on that?
I'm going to try the best of my knowledge and recollection to do that because there's a certain bit of that is still kind of up in the air in my opinion. So at the previous work session prior to the forced resignation of the previous city manager, Councilmember Otto had made a statement during the discussions and updates of the granite that the previous city manager made a statement that he had advised, confided in, had conversations with the previous military and veterans board, and they said that they were on board with the granite from China, and everybody was good to go. At that meeting, Mr. Otto had spoke up and said, well, I don't want to step on any toes, but I don't remember that conversation happening. And Mr. Otto was in person at that meeting.
I've looked for it as well, Richard, and I have yet to see it.
Well, it was even discussed at the previous Saturday meeting that we have previously discussed. The mayor told me during that time that he also went back and watched that video, and there was no discussion about that. So where all of that started from, Matt, is I have been favorable of the Veterans Memorial since the time that the Huber Heights Veterans Project was discussing this.
Yes.
And even to the time that the city acquired the project and the Veterans Commission had discussions, I've had very favorable interactions and movement on that. However, when it came up to this granite piece, where things kind of took a slight detour, per se, is back on February 16th when I got an email from the regional sales manager of Cold Spring. And I'm going to kind of paraphrase that a little bit by saying, hey, we had, submitted bids. We had discussions with LWC. And nobody has accepted our bid or even, asked us any follow-up questions. And Cold Springs went on to continue to state that they have 3 North American quarries, including one in Canada, that black granite could be obtained from. Now, not only was the individual that sent me an email, which, by the way, was unsolicited, I did not reach out to him. There was no interference of city administration. I was not trying to get involved in things. Come to find out, that same communication was received by the assistant city manager, now interim city manager. And him himself the gentleman from Cold Springs, is an Air Force veteran. So, yeah, he's got a little skin in the game on that.
Right.
And he said, hey, there was a lot of misinformation at your last meeting. I just wanted to kind of clear that up and kind of, provide you some facts and some additional information. Then I was told that Scott and LWC and the previous city manager was going to have some additional conversations, do their due diligence, which in my opinion should have already been done. And they were going to report back to council with their findings. Well, what I got back, if you review that previous work session that has been mentioned, I got a PowerPoint, what seemed to be a kind of a sales presentation with no real reason on why we're going from China to get this granite when it's available here. Now, is the etching, is the laser cutting, is it all going to be picture perfect? Again, I don't know because that's not my area of expertise. But man, I would bet my last Buffalo nickel, and I could be wrong. And if I am, I'll state it here today. I'll correct myself. That a majority, if not most, of our veterans who deserve the right to have a memorial in our community, who deserve the right to have that honor, would rather that be done on American-made product.
I would venture to say you're right. I think they haven't polled many Korean War veterans. For those who aren't familiar with history, China did come over. We did fight China during the Korean War. And Chinese granite sitting to honor American veterans is for a lot of us not good. I have a lot more to say, but I do not want to make this Veterans Memorial political. So I'm doing a lot to hold my tongue on all of this. So I'll just thank you for explaining all that to us and move on.
Well, my pleasure. Like I said, it is something I've advocated for since the discussion when the granite discussion started coming up of going to China. I've been very steadfast in my approach on that, but also it is not my goal to derail or delay the project. However, I believe we need to have all of the facts and information present, especially when members of our Military and Veterans Commission say they weren't provided that information. In my opinion, we're doing that wonderful commission a very much disservice in our veterans if everybody is not working off the same piece of paper.
And I obviously do not speak for them, but if I were in their shoes, I would want this memorial to get done. And if I'm sitting on a city commission, it's going to be, I'm listening to the city manager, I'm listening to council, and we'll do our best with their recommendations and give them our recommendations. So hopefully they stand fast and demand something from the 3 North American quarries. I think that would be the only right thing to do at this point, after everything that has went down. But that's my opinion. Take it or leave it. Let's talk a little bit about this election. Does the first question I'm seeing a lot on Facebook and Brick City Town Hall and all these Facebook groups is that what transpired on the 10th was all about the election. Is that wrong to say?
Well, that's a great question. I will tell you, in my opinion, from my vote, from my discussion, there was nothing political about that to gain election points for me. Now, was it made political for election points for other individuals at that meeting? Oh, in my opinion, definitely. Especially when you go back, and I think you've even reported on this and even, provided a video from the January 2018 meeting when it was very directly stated, reason we don't want to get rid of the city manager or go through a city manager discussion in election time is because it will be seen as political games.
I remember that very specifically.
Yeah. So when you have an individual that comes out and takes credit and ownership of, manufacturing this forced resignation, well, that individual is running for his seat, and in my opinion is very concerned about what the outcome in May is going to be. So yes, I do believe it was made political by a lot of different people.
I could probably guess what the outcome in May is going to be, and if anybody wants to know, if they want my opinion, truepodcast@gmail.com, hit me up, I'll let you know. But this is, so you, Mr. Otto, and Mr. Lyons, did you guys get together and plan this action?
I can tell you right now, there have been no backdoor, in-person meeting at City Hall, meeting at TJ Chumps, meeting at casinos. Myself, Mr. Otto, and Ed Lyons have not met in person to have any discussions, nor did we orchestrate the forced resignation of the city manager. I mean, Matt, it is no secret since 2015, and even to today, the amount of items that myself, Mr. Otto, and Ed Lyons have agreed on, you could probably put on one hand. So
Very true.
To say that the three of us had a similar opinion and seeing this for what it was, I think, in my opinion, should open up the eyes and has opened up the eyes of many of our residents and business owners within our community to say, if these three are agreeing or even have a similar of opinion on certain items that they're discussing, there's something going on here.
I would agree. Something is amiss. So let's talk. Let's go. We'll go away from all that discussion. You're running for the at-large seat, and you're running against current council member Nancy Burge.
Correct.
Councilman Otto is running for the mayor's seat, and he's running against actually Councilman Lyons and the current mayor, Gore.
Correct.
Is this a way to upseat these folks and get in the people that there's folks talking online that the only reason you guys are doing this so you can put your hand-picked choices in these seats and create some kind of, I don't know, New World Order government situation in Huber Heights.
Well, that's going pretty deep.
I know. I don't know else how to explain it. Is this some kind of conspiracy to rule Huber Heights?
Well, let me go ahead and clear the air 100% here, and I want to make sure everybody's listening. Turn up your radios, turn up your speakers, get out your notepads. You can quote me by this. This in no way is Team Huber 2.0. This is not an orchestrated event to take over the city and do what we want. That is not what has happened. For the truth to get out there, let me provide it to you. There was no secret that Mr. Otto was going to run for the mayor's seat at the end of his last election that he was very much victorious in. There was no secret that I was going to run at large when even before I ran unopposed in the previous election. Now, where I think the conversations are getting off into the political spin games because a lot of folks are very concerned on the outcome of May and November is that, oh my goodness, Richard and Glenn, they're going to handpick candidates. They're going to, which tells me if you're already having that level of discussion, there's got to be concern somewhere by some individuals on where they're going to be at this time next year.
Well, I've got something to say, but go ahead. Carry on.
Okay. So, yes, there is no doubt in my mind that there is going to be some changeover at the council level that's going to be done by the voters. And that's where it stops. I can tell you there have been zero discussions about, hey, when I'm victorious and my run in November, I'm going to handpick you to fill out the rest of my term for Ward 1. No. Those individuals goes through the same application process, very public interviews, and may the best candidate win.
So for those listening, that works. There's now a public interview process, which is excellent.
Yes.
A public interview process, and the entire council chooses if Councilman Otto and Shaw win the primary. Mr. Otto has to go through a primary. If he wins the primary, and then both of you win November, and your seats need filled because you guys are running on an off year, your
Correct.
seats would then need to be filled. Council votes to fill those seats, not you and Mr. Otto, correct?
That is correct.
And Mr. Otto, if he wins as mayor, he will not even get a vote unless there's a tie on council. Is that correct?
Unless there's a tie on council, or if council cannot make a decision in 30 days.
Right, which did happen.
Yeah, it's happened multiple times since my tenure on council.
So do you think, I don't want you to speak for Mr. Otto, but pass this on to him. I think residents would want him to make public that he will not choose anyone outside of the application process. Do you think that would be fair for the residents?
I would ask Mr. Otto to make that same public statement as well.
Okay. Because that was something else I've read. I've read a lot of different things that people are coming after you guys already for. Okay.
Well, and Matt, let me also go ahead and continue to clear the air because, again, it's campaign season, it's election season.
Right.
Misinformation gets spread around. So I've heard some rumblings out there that, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Otto went out and recruited people. They've hamstrung these people to pull petitions and run for these seats and so on. I can tell you right now, if you ask Mr. Wiley, if you ask Ms. Kitchen, or if you ask Ms. Marrero, at no point in time were they hamstrung with an arm twisted behind their back to run for those seats. Now, I can tell you additionally that Mr. Wiley, and I believe you've reported this the same, even during his wonderful Ward 3 interview, stated very publicly that he was going to run for that seat.
Right, he did.
And Mr. Hendricks said the exact same thing.
He did. And they're both great candidates.
Correct. And in previous conversations with Mrs. Anita Kitchen, she had conversations with previous councilwoman Judy Blankenship about her interest in running. And as far as Mrs. Naomi Marrero, that was not somebody that myself or Mr. Otto found or hamstrung in. As a matter of fact, another resident that went to church, that goes to church with her, contacted us and said, hey, I had just seen a post on Noemi's Facebook page that, she had, voiced some concerns about the Dayton City Mayor's situation. It sounds like, she's very much interested in running for some sort of, political seat. She wants to get involved in her community. I had conversations with her, and she's interested in running, but she would like to meet with you folks. And as myself and Mr. Otto stated publicly many of times, anybody who has an interest in running for political office, whether it's here in the city, county, state, we will sit down with anybody to tell them the process. We will show them what to do. We've even offered help to many people. I can tell you when Mr. Hendricks was gaining his petition signatures, I contacted him many times and said, hey, Joe, how's things going? You need any help? You got all the information? Even a resident by the name of Tanner Banks reached out to me with some questions. Walked him through the process. I even tried to reach out to a lady who had pulled petitions, who's on one of our boards and commissions, Gwendolyn Upshaw, because I heard that she had pulled petitions, so I wanted to see if she needed any help. Because I believe everybody that wants to have access to the ballot should have it, no matter if they're my opponent or not. Because that is democracy at its finest, in my opinion.
What it boils down to is the voter and the resident. That's why I do this podcast, Richard. It's and no offense to you or anyone else on city council in Huber Heights, but this podcast is for the resident to get it out there, to get information out there. I do believe in open, honest, and transparent city government, state government, local government, national government, and it's a hard thing to find these days. It's a hard thing to find candidates who are actually out in the city working for the people. Could people point to Team Huber and say, okay, this may be political, politics is politics sometimes. But I think you, Mr. Shaw, and Mr. Otto have really gained the residents' trust. That's my opinion. Other folks may have a different opinion. So,
and I certainly hope that's the case. I mean, everybody is human. People make mistakes. There are a lot of things that people can do better in their day jobs, their daily lives, government officials, things of that nature.
I've made probably 25 mistakes doing this podcast already.
But, it is in my belief, and I still hold true to those values when I started, this process back in 2014, 2015, that I was going to bring a voice of residents to City Hall. I was going to engage in residents with town hall meetings. I was going to engage in our business owners through our Chamber of Commerce, our Dayton Chamber of Commerce, our Northern Chamber Alliance. I was going to be involved in what's going on in our state, what's going on nationally, to bring that back here to Main Street, Huber Heights. And I believe that I've done exactly what I set out that I said I was going to do in 2015, and I'm going to continue that for several more years to come.
So, what are some things that you've brought to the city outside of what you just mentioned that you could tell some of the listeners? Some of the things that you've helped bring to Huber Heights, because I think it's important.
Goodness. Yeah, I don't know how much time you got on your podcast, but I'll consolidate a few.
Go for it.
So one of my biggest joint efforts was revitalization of our parks, putting more attention to our parks, getting rid of some playground equipment that was damaged, that was beat up, that was outside of code, not safe for our residents and our youth. We have a multitude of those examples throughout the community, not just here in Ward 1. Miami Villa Park is a great example of that. Additionally, the parkland at Dial and Longford, I and a lot of others worked with our school district to get that land transferred over. And
that's
now
right. I remember that.
So we have a plan of action now moving forward with the Mountain Bike Association. Josh King, who's done an amazing job as our parks manager, and in my opinion, needs all the empowerment he needs to make everything possible. So that's moving forward. Water softening was a big one that the residents had asked for previously with a Wright State survey. Another one was, I know this is kind of controversial, was the dog park.
Why is that controversial?
Well, that's controversial because, I had went out and brought that out to the residents from a previous Wright State survey that this community had asked for a dog park previously. I had gotten in contact with some of our state representatives and the National League of Cities, brought back a lot of research to our community on dog parks, even went and visited several. That idea came back to City Council, and it was dead on arrival until, in my opinion, mysteriously it was dusted off by another council member, and we were off and running with a dog park committee, and boom, brand new dog park. And I'm sitting here saying, well, this was discussed many years ago. Here's all the research. Why did it take so long?
That's interesting that you say that. That's happened to other folks as well.
Oh, it's happened to many times. Yes.
It's all good. As long as it happens, that's what truly matters.
That's it. I mean, the same situation with body cameras. You know, I requested that, you know, body cameras be, you know, a very vital part of our community several years ago. That was kind of dead on arrival because a lot of folks were telling me we don't want to be the first ones to do it. There's issues with storage, IT, and then several years later, here we are getting body cameras.
That's awesome. How do the police officers feel about that? I know how public really wants it. How do Huber police officers feel about that?
You know, that's a question that you know, I have you know, several Huber Heights police officers that I call my friend, and I can tell you, not soliciting their information, you know, I can tell you that it's been very positive thus far. I've heard no negatives.
Good.
But I believe there's still a learning curve, and there's still, you know, adjustments that need to be made, but we're on the right track.
Good deal.
So yeah, a few other things that comes to mind is the expansion of Marylee Way to add an additional turn lane to alleviate some traffic congestion that was previous, and now we, of course, are still talking about traffic congestion. Right. I did help out with the acquisition of actually two major assets in our community: the old Racquetball Club and the old Danbury Cinemas. So yeah, again, I mean, we can. This list can really just kind of, you know, spiral and kind of continue.
Well, here's another question. Do you have anything? I know COVID's still kind of in, it's kind of out. The governor's saying he may release some of these mandates. Do you have any plans to meet with residents and for this campaign moving forward?
Oh, definitely. I can tell you, even during COVID, I've had a few virtual meetings with residents because I believe the engagement still needs to continue. And, you know, as my campaign promise and what I've done previously, holding multitude of public meetings, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, I believe I've held more public meetings as a council member than all of my colleagues combined.
I would, if I had to guess, I can't count them all up, but yeah, I would say you did.
Additionally, there's been several times where I've actually had more people attend my community meetings than have attended city council meetings. Right. Now, I say that for 2 points, because people trust the information I'm providing, but two, I really think those same residents who are attending those public meetings and wanting to get involved also need to be attending those work sessions and city council meetings.
Definitely. Get involved and stay involved.
But yeah, back to your question, I do have several items lined up, several businesses and areas that I'm going to be holding some public meetings. I'm going to be doing some park meetings. I'm going to be doing some virtual items. I tell you what, I've got a lot of people that have surrounded me and said, you know, hey, we want to help out in any way we can. We like what you've done. Let us know what we can do. I mean, Matt, I've got a plethora of items on the radar. Unlike, you know, 2015 when Team Huber unseated 75% of city council at that time, you know, it's a situation now. I'm holding nothing back at this point. You know, we got a lot of things in the hopper that I think, even with COVID and without COVID, we're really going to make a good impact this year. As far as my campaign, I can't speak for others, right. But I'm very excited.
Well, I would like to do this. A lot of times I come on this podcast and I complain about government and I show the rough side of government. Now, for the listeners, what is going good in the city of Huber Heights?
You're asking me what's going good?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. I tell you what, and I stated this publicly. I think our economic development, our boom that we're seeing, has just been absolutely amazing. I mean, I don't know if there's one individual person that can take credit for everything. It's been a true team effort. I will say that has been one of my pleasures working with my current colleagues that I have to give kudos to. Right, wrong, or indifferent, this community is moving forward, and we are growing. I mean, you can talk about, the expansion and redevelopment of the racquetball club that's going to be Big Sandy Superstore. The fact that Danbury Cinemas has been acquired and is going to be redeveloped. The fact that, the Osaka is going to be turned into a Chick-fil-A.
What?
Yeah.
Okay. Keep going.
We can talk about, the recent opening of Cane's. I mean, there is a lot of business growth here, and it's absolutely amazing because a lot of it is natural growth. A lot of it. I mean, even speaking with a good friend of mine, Mike, with Broad Reach Retail Partners, we have had a good working relationship, going back 2015, 2016. And their acquisition of Swan Lake Apartments to look into doing a very large commercial piece, and some residential assets there too. There's some issues that need to be worked out with traffic. We do have a traffic problem in this community that needs to be addressed, and we are addressing it. We do have plans in place. But I think looking outside of that, the business growth has just been phenomenal.
It has.
We got a brand new Valvoline that's coming to the intersection of Taylorsville and Troy. Just great brand new things that are coming along. I've also been told, and we can kind of call this some breaking news.
Exclusive, a Truman's Town Hall exclusive.
Yes, I have been told that conversations have been restarted on the reacquisition and reopening of the IHOP in Huber Heights.
Wow.
Yes, there have been a lot of things on the burners because of some court actions, some legal things that had been taken care of. I can say that conversations have started opening up by individuals that I've been in contact with other IHOP restaurants. So hopefully we can get that building back open and running.
Awesome.
And then again, former C's Pizza used to be the Double Deuce. That's transforming into a very kind of medium-sized convenience store, kind of gas station type situation. I've been told that there's been some interest in the former Family Video location on Brant Pike. Again, we can keep this party going, but that is one of the highlights, in my opinion, that's really going on in the community right now is our business growth, and great working relationships with our Chamber of Commerce, our Northern Chamber Alliance, Dayton Development Coalition, MVRPC. Again, everybody has had a finger in the plans and has been, a really good receptive partner to continue where we're going. Awesome.
I think a lot of folks really enjoy hearing what's happening positively. So I saw something, and I don't want to go into too much detail about it, but I saw something over the weekend. The La Mandola building. Is the city able to get that and help people with that? I don't.
So Matt,
if you know what I'm.
I will tell you, and again, I don't consider this a backdoor meeting because, it did happen at City Hall and during normal business hours, and clerk of council was made aware of it. Conversations took place with the previous city manager at that time, but myself and Mr. Otto have been engaged in several previous discussions and even recent discussions that I can't go into detail on entities that are very much interested in the resurrection of La Mandola for a great public purpose.
That would be great. That would be great.
It was something that was discussed previously before the gentleman from California took ownership of it. Those conversations then took place after, and then I will tell you, just even within the past 2 weeks, I've had discussions with some entities here in our city that are interested. I've sent them to the way of our assistant city manager, now interim city manager, Scott Fikowski, to work through that process. I provided them my thoughts and opinions on how it could be successful. And I'm just honored that these people will reach out to me and ask these questions so that I can point them in the right direction to gain resources within our city or our county to make sure that an asset like La Mandola, and I believe it is an asset, that it can be revitalized and repurposed for a great community need.
I'll say this, I don't know if there's anything I can do, but if there's anything I can do, run an errand, do something here on this podcast, whatever it may be, let me know, because I think that would be a good place to have a good community project.
I definitely think that anything that we do there that involves community and repurpose, and I believe the city should help, but not do it all.
Correct. Right.
We definitely have to, work with our partners the right way. But yes, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that something exciting will come out of those discussions.
Right. And I think a good thing that may come from the release, the resignation of the former city manager is if you start rebuilding positive communication with nonprofits in the city. I think the Chamber of Commerce, the Huber Heights Chamber of Commerce, would be a good asset for the city of Huber Heights, and so on with all the other nonprofits. I know there's some different issues there, but I'll let you guys deal with that.
No, I would agree. This community has a wonderful and robust nonprofit community. Our Chamber of Commerce does a great job of meeting with them, holding different types of summits for our nonprofits, even our faith community as well. So, I mean, yes, there's a lot of issues that others have with our Chamber of Commerce. I don't know if it's the fact that they're not business friendly, or they, have political issues with certain individuals and entities. But for the Chamber of Commerce not to be working hand in hand with the city of Huber Heights and vice versa, I think is a real disservice to our residents and our businesses within our community. And I've had a lot of people direct that same thought back to me. Very unhappy with the direction that certain people have taken, and really casting out the Chamber of Commerce. I will tell you that to this day, I still attend their monthly business speakers that take place at Chumps. I just had a great business engagement with our executive director, helping out some businesses over at Wayne Plaza who had some power issues. Myself, Mr. Otto, the chamber director, had met over there. And just so you know, Matt, the previous city manager and even our code enforcement officer knew those meetings were taking place and had no issues.
Great.
So, yeah, no, I mean, again, I think the chamber does an amazing job. I think they're a huge asset, and I'm excited to continue that working relationship and even expand upon that in the future.
Richard Shaw, I'm going to give you the last word. If you have anything else you want to tell our listeners, the floor is yours, sir.
I certainly appreciate it. I just want to thank every resident, business owner that has, been able to trust me, being a voice for them at City Hall. My plan is to continue that for years to come. I have a great love for this community and plan to continue to serving it at the pleasure of the residents. I hope in November the residents will allow me to continue that service. And again, we really do need to continue to have open, honest, and transparency in our government. And you, the residents, demand it. Go out and demand that your council members do their research, provide you that research, and account to you. The residents of this community are at the top of the tier in the organizational chart within the city of Huber Heights. Take that power and run with it, and make sure the people that are doing your job at City Hall is really, truly representing you. Matt, I certainly thank you for the time.
You said it all. Thank you, Mr. Shaw. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.